Our research team, who you see pictured here, has been focused on assessing fire impacts and post-fire recovery for the Connecting Wildlands and Communities project. Wildfire has long been an important natural process across the diverse ecosystems of the southwestern United States, which is also one of the most fire-prone parts of the country, as you can see in the map in red. And these fires strongly impact humans and ecosystems, which in turn impact subsequent fires. And while human impacts from fires tend to be negative, ecological impacts are more complex and they vary from region to region. An important concept that captures this regional variation is called the fire regime, which describes the typical characteristics of fire in a region that evolve over time. And the plants and animals in a region therefore develop adaptations to these specific ranges of variation. And for many reasons, from climate to land use change, many natural fire regimes are being altered, which seriously threatens ecosystems and often people too. Fire regimes are being altered in different ways, however, for different reasons. So whereas a number of forested ecosystems are experiencing a deficit in fire frequency, in Southern California, like much of the southwestern United States, the problem is with fire frequency that is much too high for native plant species to sustain. And when frequent fire is coupled with the invasion of flammable weedy grasses, what can happen is called a grass fire cycle. And the premise is that frequent fire can eliminate woody plants, opening the way for the invasion of grass, which is very flammable, and thus increases the probability of fires in a reinforcing positive cycle. And this is happening across many places in the Southwest US, as you can see in the map to the left. And it's also happening in Southern California, where chaparral has type converted to grass. But there are many questions that remain, such as how much is happening, where, and why. And this is a big focus of the fire team.
Historical land satellite imagery provides a convenient source for mapping fire properties and vegetation recovery dynamics over the past 36 years in county. Stakeholders benefit from having open access to ecoregion-wide maps derived from these satellite images, which depict land characteristics pertaining to wildfire regime and changes. The Landsat image archive extends from 1984 to present with up to 22 images captured per year. The U.S. Geological Survey processes Landsat data and provides them for free. The CWC fire team is producing maps of several fire-related properties for the Southern California ecoregion, including burned areas and fire histories with greater spatial detail and accuracies than extant maps, trends in post-fire recovery of chaparral, and current and change in percentage of grass cover. The rationale for and characteristics of these projects will be summarized by the postdoctoral researchers and 2 graduate students who are producing them.
Burn area products are important and can be used by a wide variety of stakeholders. For example, conservation biologists use it to understand vegetation stand age, know intervals between fires, and helps with conservation. Fire managers use it to map fuel age, know the burn extent, and assess the results of suppression. Fire scientists use it as inputs for fire regime models. And lastly, climate modelers use it to know how much smoke and carbon enters the atmosphere from a fire. However, we need better burn area maps. Current products are MTBS, a federal government project, and in California, we have CAL FIRE perimeters. One study suggests that these products substantially overmap the amount of area burned. This isn't only because perimeters aren't exact, but primarily because they assume most of the interior of a fire burn when this isn't the case. Overmapping burns creates problems. For example, it gives us inaccurate vegetation stand ages, among many other things. As you can see to the left is an MTBS fire perimeter with a blue CAL FIRE perimeter on top. The map to the right uses a more accurate USGS Landsat burn area or LBA map. You can see how much more unburned area there is. Currently, we're working with LBA data to make a binary burn, not burn product. By creating a product using Landsat data, we're not only able to make a more precise and uniform product, but also able to make one that goes back to 1984. This time series will better allow researchers and others to understand spatial and temporal trends in wildfire.
One contribution to this project is an assessment of vegetation resilience using satellite remote sensing, which has led to scientific insight as well as data products to support conservation. At bottom left is a plot representing the recovery profile of one small area that burned in 1994 as an example. We can use this info to assess either the rate or ultimate degree of recovery. This work addresses 2 major questions. what factors determine recovery, and what factors explain differences in recovery rate. We found that drought conditions partly determine recovery. This map shows one of our data products, a map to indicate differences in sensitivity to drought in chaparral that is recovering after fire. Drought can greatly diminish recovery, especially in desert fringe locations, whereas sites nearer to the coast are less subject to this drought effect. This information can be useful in order to target restoration efforts on the more vulnerable areas. For a set of locations distributed widely in this map, we are assessing differences in recovery timing. This graph shows a spectrum of recovery as a function of time after fire. On average, chaparral tends to recover to at least 80% within a decade and 90% within 15 years. Recovery time is most rapid at low elevation. We're currently studying the reasons for this variation in recovery timing. Mapping this variable could help to improve assessments of fire risk according to fuel accumulation stage.
Recall the grass fire cycle. Data have indicated that these flammable grasses have expanded over time, and this may pose problems for fire management and biodiversity-focused teams. We are using remote sensing to develop, apply, and validate invasive grass cover mapping and change monitoring approaches based on image data acquired over a 36-year period. Our images are from satellites and airborne platforms collected by the U.S. Geological Survey, NASA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Remote sensing allows us to distinguish between land cover types and identify areas with grasses. We can then access historical image data back to 1984 to learn which areas have experienced a grass cover expansion over time. We aim to address the consequences of grasses invading natural shrubland ecoregions, how their presence affects fire risk, and the role this expansion may play on both the local landscape and the fire regime. Here, you see a product that communicates absolute change in grass cover between the mid-1980s and present time. Areas that have experienced an increase or expansion in grass cover are red. Here are zoomed-in views of just a few locations. By mapping and monitoring invasive grasses, we're creating products that will help our stakeholders assess past changes to the landscape, the current state, and potentially to forecast future changes. They will be armed with the knowledge they need to make recommendations to pursue restoration strategies in wildlands or mitigation activities for communities before the start of the next wildfire season.
Thus far, we have spent a lot of time talking about the fire cycle from the perspective of the natural world, how vegetation defines wildfire fuel, and extreme weather can influence that fuel. My focus is on the importance of human communities, modifying the typical wildfire triangle to highlight how humans affect the drivers of wildfire. In particular, suburban sprawl can lead to vegetation changes and more ignitions in the wildland-urban interface. Where and how we build has implications to who, what, and how many structures get burned. In the final minute, I ask, are lower-priced homes more likely to burn? For a representative example, I show the merged Grand Prix and Old Fire outside of San Bernardino. Burned structures are in the red point cloud and unburned structures are in the blue point cloud. As a function of home price, here on the x-axis and corrected for appreciation. Looking at the red cloud, we see it has shifted to the left, meaning that houses that burned had lower price. However, what if these lower priced homes are built in locations with higher wildfire risk? The next step was to build a model that accounts for the risk of burning. Fitting that model through the 2-point clouds yielded the solid purple line. The probability of burning was significantly impacted by the price of the home. The same relationship emerged for the largest fires in the data set, those in green here, and when all fires were considered together. We hypothesized that less affluent homeowners have trouble implementing fire hardening home protection measures. Exploring this is the next step. In summary, like many natural disasters, wildfire has a human and a natural component where there are often differential impacts to who is put at greatest risk. Further, there are feedbacks between fuel management, changing climate, and changing land use. Land use planning that reduces accidental ignitions, reduces the spread of flammable non-native vegetation, and reduces suburban sprawl would have co-benefits to human and natural communities. Thank you.